Okay, first thing I need to do is apologize for the terrible sound. I'm using the game DVR that's built into Windows 10. I've never really done a video like this before, so that's the first thing I found to try to use, so that's what I'm using. And if you don't know about it, what you do is you select a window and then hold down the Windows key and hit G like game, and it's for recording games, but you can use it to record other things. And I don't know why the sound's so bad, but it's just the way it is. That's not the only thing bad about this demonstration, but here we go. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate using the OpenSpot, the Geo router, to be able to access two OpenSpots, one on the WAN port and one on the LAN port. Also, you can access the web page for the configuration of those OpenSpots from the cell phone that's providing the hotspot. So first of all, one thing that you're going to need is a DMR radio configured to listen to target group 9 and to be able to issue the command 9001 to retrieve the IP address of the OpenSpot. If you don't have a radio configured to do that, then this video won't help you be able to access the OpenSpot from the web page on your cell phone that's doing the hotspot. But this video still will just demonstrate how to have two hotspots connected. So you just need the radio if you want to be able to access the web pages on the OpenSpots from the cell phone that's doing the tethering. Also, if you want to be able to have the computer connected to the LAN port of the GL router while you're doing configurations, and at the same time have your hotspot connected over to the WAN port, you need two network cables. If you don't have two network cables, or you don't want it connected that way, then whenever we get to the point that we access the hotspot, of course, you'll have to disconnect the Ethernet cable from the computer and connect it over to the OpenSpot. I might have said hotspot a while ago. But if you have two cables, you can connect up the OpenSpot to the WAN RJ45 and connect your computer, in my case a notebook, to the LAN port of the Geo router. Also, it'd be good to have your cell phone ready with the hotspot already set up. I'm not going to go through and explain how to set a hotspot up. You should be able to find that many places. One other thing that would be beneficial is to have Open Network Sharing Center and change adapter settings to have your adapter list over here. And in this list, have the one that you're working with the Geo router. If you have that visible, that would be helpful. In my case, I have one going to the router and one going to the internet. One thing that needs to be done, if you've configured your Geo router previously, is to hold the reset button on the side down for 10 seconds and make sure that red light on the side goes off when you release it, otherwise it's probably not getting reset. So I just reset my router and it'll take about a minute for it to get set up. And then your browser, put in the address 192.168.8.1. That's the default address for the Geo mini router. And when you look at your Ethernet adapter. It should be trying to find the network. You should have that adapter set for retrieving automatically IP addresses. If you have that adapter set for a static IP, it needs to be reset. Right click properties, then go into IPv4 settings. Make sure it's set for obtain. Once the configuration page loads, select your language, your time zone, then put in your passwords. Let's see if my phone still has, okay. Now we're going to select the internet settings right here. Go to new connection. Then while it's loading in the list of connections, we can put in the password. Then choose the correct connection. We're going to leave it on WISP mode the first time so that we can get the IP address that the phone provides from the hotspot of the phone. You can see here when it searches for an address. In the WISP mode, which is wireless internet service provider, the GL router is providing the IP address to your computer. But when we go to the next mode, which is WDS, wireless distribution service, then the GL router no longer provides IP addresses to your computer or to the OpenSpot. Everything comes from the cell phone. So once we get connected through the WISP connection to the cell phone, sometimes I can see the address here. Sometimes it says unknown. But the address here should be what we're looking for, which is the same as this for what's called the subnet. The first three numbers here is what we're concerned with. Whatever these first three numbers are, that's what the cell phone hotspot is providing to the GL router. Excuse me. And the GL router is also going to pass that subnet to your computer and to the OpenSpot once we go to this next mode. So once we have these first three numbers, then we want to go to new connection, repeater, put in the password. Sometimes it remembers this. And then the right connection, the password. This time we're going to choose WDS. And since we know the first three segments, we'll put that in right here for a new LAN IP address. That's going to be the address of the GL mini router's LAN RJ45 port. And that address is what we're going to use to connect from our web page to the GL router. From our web browser to the GL router's web page. So the first three numbers got to be the same. And then for this last number, you can pretty much pick any number that's above 1 and less than 255. So 2 to 254. You can pick, but you don't really want to pick the one that's used by the cell phone or by the GL router interface to the cell phone. or the one used by the OpenSpot, but since we don't know that, it doesn't matter. And I think even if you do pick one that's the same as what they're going to provide, it'll just, next time when you connect, it'll just provide a different address. So I always pick number 55. It's easy to do. So once you do that, then the LAN IP address is going to be this right here. Instead of 192.168.8.1, it's going to be 192.168.43.55. So once I hit this, we're not going to be connected in this web browser anymore. So what we have to do is change this address. .43.55, hit enter, and we see this trying to find the address because the GL router's still, well, no, the GL router's not giving the address anymore. This is coming from Cellphone. So the Cellphone is giving the computer an address, and also after the next step, it's going to give an address to the OpenSpot. The main way I can tell if I'm actually connected from the browser to the GL router is to choose two different settings over here, and then this should change. Sometimes it looks like you're connected, but you're not. So if for some reason this Cellphone hotspot goes out, disconnects, we will not have the correct address over here anymore, and we will not be connected to the GL router, because the GL router only has an address right now from the Cellphone. So if the Cellphone disconnects, the GL router is not really going to have an address supplied to it for us to connect to. Well, I take that back. The GL router is going to have that, excuse me, that 155, that 55 address, but this LAN adapter here is not going to have an address for us. To get to that, we'll have to set this to a static IP. So once we have this connected with WDS, now this is a portion where you can do one of two things. You can follow through with advanced settings and change the advanced settings here. If you have your OpenSpot connected to the WAN port with an additional network cable, then you won't have to shift the cable over. And if you don't care about having two OpenSpots connected at the same time, and if you don't care about being able to have the OpenSpot connected at the same time while you're configuring the GL router, in other words, two network cables plugged in to the router at the same time, then you don't need to do this step here. This step right here is only needed if you either want to have two OpenGL routers connected at the same time, or if you want to be able to have your computer connected to the GL router and the OpenSpot connected to the GL router at the same time. If you don't care about either one of those, you don't need to do this step here. Right click on Advanced Options, open in a new tab, and here you log in with the same login that you put previously. Then you go to Network Interfaces, the LAN port, Edit, then Physical Settings, and here's where we want to check. It's the same option that has the WAN and the WAN 6 on it. So if If your setting doesn't show this same exact VLAN Ethernet 02 as the name of it, I would say pick the one that shows the WAN and the WAN 6 on it. Once you select that, scroll down, save and apply. Once you do that, now both LAN ports are pretty much connected together, so to speak, but each one will get their own IP address from the cell phone connection. In these advanced settings, I tried over and over and over, at least probably 100 ways or more, probably 200, to try to get DHCP to work from the Geo router and also to do this coupling. And I tried many combinations, found that I only need to do this one thing to get the two RJ45s to operate at the same time. But I tried all kinds of combinations and also things in the DHCP and DNS to try to get DHCP to work on the Geo mini router whenever we're in the WDS mode, but I haven't been able to do that. It appears that the Geo router being able to do DHCP at the same time that the cell phone does it, that's like maybe they're mutually exclusive or something. I thought I was able to do that before, though, with the undocumented feature of the reset button. I'm not sure. Once this goes through, then your OpenSpot should connect, and if you have your radio on target group 9, I keep saying target group, I mean talk group 9, then you should be able to hear it connect. Sometimes it doesn't give the full message. That is if you have both network cables connected to the Geo router. If you don't have both network cables connected to the Geo router, disconnect the network cable that you have connected in the computer and connect that to the OpenSpot. And it should make the connection now, and you should hear the same message that we're hearing here in just a minute. Sometimes it takes us OpenSpots a few minutes. Yeah, that time it just said. Okay, it's told what Brandmeister server it's connected to. Sometimes it doesn't say that whole message, and even sometimes it doesn't even say a whole word, it just does some kind of bleep. But now on the radio, what you need to do from talk group 9 is issue the command of 9001
OpenSpot IP address 192.168.43.124.
So now we heard that the IP address of the OpenSpot is 192.168.43.124. So when I go to my cell phone, open up a browser, and I put that address in, now I get the OpenSpot status. If I key up, you see the status update, and then I can go anywhere in the OpenSpot configuration settings I want to. Now, on the GL router, I have the computer connected and I have an OpenSpot connected. If I wanted two OpenSpots to be connected, I would just unplug the computer from the GL router and plug in another OpenSpot, and that OpenSpot should get its own IP address. So you would have to connect to that OpenSpot with your radio, under alternate frequency. I don't have two OpenSpots, but people that have two OpenSpots, you'll know how to connect to whichever OpenSpots you want. I suppose it's a channel with alternate frequencies on there. So then you would get the IP address for that OpenSpot in the same fashion as we did here. Now the next thing is we're still connected to the GL router because the cell phone is giving our computer. Oh, if you're finished with the radio getting the IP address, disconnect the OpenSpot. Disconnect the Ethernet cable from the OpenSpot and plug it back into your computer if you've only got one cable and that's all you're using. And you'll find that while the cell phone's working, you still can control this configuration through your web page because your computer network card's getting the IP address from the cell phone. But if you go to the cell phone and you disconnect the hotspot, now the router doesn't have an IP address on its wireless interface, and whenever this address changes, right now it's still holding the same address, but look, when it does that, then you know it's, oh, when you click on this, it does that. If I disable this, enable it, now you see it's not getting an IP address anymore. It continued to have the old IP address for a few minutes, but once it gets reset, you don't have an IP address here anymore. So in order to control your GL mini router, you're going to have to set a static IP address here because the mini router is not giving IP addresses to your computer anymore. So right click Properties, go into IPv4 settings, double click, or Properties, set that to use the following address, and here again we got to put the same first three segments of the subnet of the router because we set the router to be 192.168.43.55. So here we can put pretty much any number except for 55, number 1, or 255. And the GL router for me usually sets it to 121, so that's a good number to try. And once you get that set, now you can communicate with the router again. That's the IP address of the router. So that's pretty much it for this demonstration. You can have the computer connected, working on the configuration on the router, and the OpenSpot connected at the same time, so you don't have to swap the cords while you're doing tests, because there's a lot of things you can do inside here. And if anybody knows how to have the GL mini router set up in this WDS mode, and at the same time configure this to allow the router to do DHCP, so you don't have to put a static address here. That would be nice, but I'm not sure if that's possible. So that's it from K7CET. Hope this helps people be able to access their OpenSpot from the single phone that's doing the hotspot, and also lets you have two hotspots on the same geo router. 73.